All right, Lindsay, tell us. So why is Mary Mary your standout track? And of course, we might be able to talk about the other three you wanted to talk about as well, because,
Totally.
why not? It's our podcast. We can do whatever we want.
So I kind of picked Mary Mary for two reasons. The first being, well, just kind of as we discussed before, this was one of like two songs on the album that was written and produced by Mike Nesmith, and that's the only time that one of the Monkees kind of had their fingerprints on one of the songs creatively. And I have always found it so intriguing because on paper, the music and the lyrics do not seem like they should go together at all. Because if you look at the lyrics in isolation, it's just like a flat out yearning, kind of dreary breakup song. But then the score is just so punchy and groovy and energetic. And so I've always loved that Nesmith basically took like the classic breakup song and like drenched it in sunshine, which is just so the Monkees. And also I think such like an intriguing microcosm of his creativity. And then the second reason I chose it is because I always felt like Mary Mary was really kind of like one of the keys that unlocked their ability to gain that creative autonomy that they were fighting for throughout the album's rollout. Because between Mary Mary and The Kind of Girl I Could Love, Nesmith's other song, Mary Mary kind of caught fire a bit more, particularly internationally. It like did really well. And so, although they shouldn't have been in a position where they needed to prove this, Mary Mary proved to the powers that be at Screen Gems that good things happened when you let the Monkees be in charge of the Monkees. And that really great work could come out of that. And so I always felt like Mary Mary was really kind of like an instrumental step to getting them to where they wanted to be. And it's really cool because you see that like immediately on their subsequent album, Headquarters. That was the first time that all four of them had writing credits. Previously, it had just been Nesmith.
So Mary Mary, not the most successful song off the album. The most successful being I'm a Believer, written by Neil Diamond, which was their most successful song ever. I believe it was Billboard's Song of 1967, like overall, just like the song of the year. I'm curious though, and like I've already said, I'm a big fan of The Kind of Girl I Could Love, which is under 2 minutes, and it sort of feels kind of representative of, if I'm not mistaken, where Mike Nesmith sort of ends up going with his music, because he gets a little more countrified in ways. I would like to ask you though about two other songs on this album that I think are different. First of all, there's a track called The Day We Fall in Love, which is basically a sort of symphonic, like almost like, is it Henry Mancini? Is that the person I'm thinking of? Like of like very like 1950s kind of symphonic background while Davy Jones like recites a poem over it. I would like you to defend this song, please.
Okay. Sorry, I can't listen to or even talk about that song without laughing.
Yeah.
It's also the only song from the first two albums that does not appear anywhere in the TV show.
I actually didn't know that. That's so interesting.
I think it makes sense. I think I understand why.
Yeah. Yes. So that track cracks me up because I feel like the brief was basically, not like literally was, but it may as well have been like, what if we made Je t'aime for kids? And
oh, shit. Yeah.
that's just, I always think of that. I've always thought of that as like the PG version of like Je t'aime, but it's like Davy Jones talking about like walking through the snow and holding hands. It just cracks me up. There is just nothing like The Day We Fall in Love. I've never heard, I guess maybe bar Je t'aime itself, I've never heard anything else like that. And I think that that song is not only just like unique without context, but it's just so deliciously representative of kind of like the camp that was always kind of woven into the Monkees' image and that contributed to their success. Now, was that camp intentional? Probably not. Like, this was probably made to, like, you know, make, like, girls who were in high school in, like, 1973 swoon. And that's valid and fine. But I think that that sort of... I don't want to say schmaltziness, but how can you describe it any other way? That kind of
Yeah.
schmaltziness, I think, was really integral to getting the Monkees to where they were, because I
Mhm.
think for every Mary Mary and the kind of girl I could love, you needed The Day We Fall in Love.
Mhm.
And I think in some ways having tracks like that, even though, they probably like grit their teeth over it, was really instrumental to, especially in the early years, giving them that foundation to then pursue that creative autonomy. So I guess what I'm saying is it's kind of like musical jury duty to
Interesting.
include a
Yeah.
track like that. But
Well,
it's just so fun.
the camp fact, I forgot, because the television show is quite campy.
Oh God. Yeah.
And so, yeah, I guess that does sort of match. But second song, Your Auntie Griselda,
So it's such a good name, though.
which I feel like I remember seeing seeing the episode that featured that song, and I think I don't have time to try and track down the exact episode. I'm pretty sure it was a very nonsensical episode, and I'm not even sure that the song connected to the plot at all of the episode.
That makes it even better.
Yeah, it does.
Well, in a way, yeah.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, and also it's like one of the few times Peter sings.
Yeah.
I also read that he was not a huge fan of the song either. I think primarily because of its like novelty. He's like, "Oh, I'm singing a novelty song on this album.
Right,
Like, what's up
right.
with that?" So I don't know. Your thoughts on that one?
Yeah, oh my gosh. Those are literally the exact two I was hoping you would ask about, because I just been like
It would have to be, yeah.
Right, exactly. It would have to be. What do you even begin to say about your Auntie Griselda? I think it says so much about the Monkees that they could have a song like that on an album as commercially successful as
Sure.
More of the Monkees was. I think it's like a huge nod to their popularity and strength that something like that, which is debatably one of the worst songs on the album, go on to be so astoundingly commercially successful. I think it's safe to say that that would almost certainly not happen today, or
Mhm.
even in relatively recent history. And
Okay,
so
yeah.
I think the interesting thing about that song isn't just that it's, kind of like The Day We Fall in Love. Not just that it's like, campy and silly and fun, but I think it's so interesting that like that song was not a roadblock. And it like, became as like best-selling and like, culturally significant as it was, despite its presence smack in the middle of the album. I think that's the true anomaly. Auntie Griselda was not a roadblock in any way, and that is a huge nod to how, just successful and otherwise, very prolific they were as artists.
It might help that it's smack in the middle of the album, actually, because it maybe just gets lost in there a little bit.
you forget it. You move on to Je t'aime for kids, and then it's gone.
And I think that's why it's also astounding that Smackwater Jack didn't sync Tapestry a little bit more. Of course, Smackwater Jack was a standard that she was covering anyway, but like it's the last song on the album. The last song in the album, you typically have to stick the landing, but Carole King got away with that for some reason. We're still trying to figure that out on this podcast.
That's such a good point. Yeah, it's just I think it says a lot about like an album that is not only like culturally significant, but you can laugh with and at from a loving place, of course, as well. It's very rare that you can laugh at an album and have it be as enduring and successful as it is. And I think with those two songs, that's kind of where like the magic lies.
Maybe we're going to be saying this about 100 Gex sometime in the next 30 years,
God.
Truly. Maybe we just don't know. Maybe we're too old. Maybe we're too old to fully get what this is leading on to,
That wouldn't surprise me. I don't know them that much, but my brother's a fan. And like the few songs he has shown me, I have been experiences, but
it's a total experience, and I there's something to it. I haven't figured out what it is. I know I'm not the target audience for it, and that's okay.
Likewise.
Actually, maybe we are the target audience for 100 Gex. I don't know. Are we? I don't know.
I'm definitely not. I
don't know.
That. As
Michael,
the
you're a
resident
guy
grandpa,
with a music podcast, so of course you're
the resident grandpa on this podcast. Though I feel like I am
you
not
are
the target
you.
audience.
You and I both grandpa. That's we do okay by that. So I guess this is a good segue. This is a good segue for us to kind of talk about we come to find out you actually didn't, at least maybe, and maybe this is on us, maybe that we cut it out in the edit for some reason, which is significant oversight. But we ask our guests the question what their standards for perfection are and were that they judge their perfect albums on. And for some reason in your initial episode, we didn't get yours in there. So I guess this is an opportunity for us to say, what are your standards for perfection? And how does More of the Monkees fit those?
Yeah, absolutely. So I realized, like, thinking back to especially like Never Mind the Bollocks and now, that my standards of perfection for like what makes like a great album to me is not just like the work itself and
Mm.
its, sort of like long-standing cultural endurance and the impression it made and what it inspired, but also the story behind the album and the circumstances around the album, particularly in regards to the artist experience. And what I realized is that a lot of like what the Sex Pistols went through, kind of within and surrounding Never Mind the Bollocks, is very much what the Monkees went through with More of the Monkees, because the story of both albums is the story of a fight for creative agency and winning that fight for creative agency. I find that really interesting, particularly because for both the Monkees and the Sex Pistols, these occurrences happened quite early on in their career. The Sex Pistols, of course, it was their first album. The Monkees, it was as a surprise to them, their second, but it came out very quickly after their first. And I just find stories where artists are willing to kind of like put their neck on the line and stand up for themselves really early on when they're in a vulnerable place with a lot to lose so intriguing. And I'm sure
Mm-hmm.
that in the decades that have passed since More of the Monkees and Never Mind the Bollocks, there are artists who probably, were able to source courage from the Sex Pistols, were able to source courage from Mike Nesmith, maybe not punch a hole in a wall, but like,
Mm-hmm.
kind of take it upon themselves to realize, like, just because I'm early in my career doesn't mean that I, can't exercise my own power and try to achieve my own power and not bite the hand that feeds, but also kind of say, like, I want to be the hand that feeds myself. And that's not easy to do, but these artists did it. And yeah, just the fact that they really went there when it would have been easier to not, I think I really respect. And I think knowing that the artists really fought for that throughout the album makes listening to it a lot more enjoyable for me, because you're able to listen to it not just enjoying the work or maybe even snickering a bit at the work, but knowing kind of like what it costs and what they were fighting for behind the backdrop of that work.
Well said. Yeah, and that makes sense as I know like that makes sense kind of like where your values lie and kind of like what is most interesting to you about a work of art, just in our two conversations so far. And the sneaky punk rock thing, it's great. There's lots of think about all the sneaky punk rock albums that are out there, and ones that we're not looking at from that perspective, but when you look at the kind of angle at which the artist has had to bring them into the world, it makes you think about music on a different level. To reiterate for anybody who hasn't done a little bit of research about the Monkees before this, like, so am I understanding it correctly that they just did kind of like big recording sessions, recorded all of these tracks like in a very kind of factory style setting, and then the label cobbled a bunch of those together for this album, so that and then just released it of their own volition because they had whatever authority over the masters, right?
Yeah, absolutely. That's exactly what happened.
And we're still dealing with this.
They also did not approve the image on the front of the album, because
Yes.
it was originally, apparently they thought it was an image for a deal. Again, talk about like machine, a deal with like J.C. Penney and Tom
Yeah,
McCann.
J.C. Penney.
And so that, like, they didn't approve of that. They're also, I read them too, that they took issue with the liner notes because Don Kirshner wrote the liner notes, and they are very like self-congratulatory. Like, he's like, I assembled all these great songwriters to do all these things, and I thought this was great, and I'm so glad that I came up with this idea, and blah blah blah. He wasn't even the one who originated the band, to be honest. We're not one of the two original like producers.
Yeah.
But
Insane. Insane.
I just respect the fact that I think this might be the first time we've had a guest actually talk about the artist's like ethos as being a big reason for an album's perfection. Because what are we on, episode 174,000 or something? Like we've had a lot of different answers to this question. I don't think that's come up in that way yet.
Well, not in so specific a way. I think I think the only other time your talk about the Sex Pistols, I think, is the only other time it's been put in those specific political terms. Because I think pretty much, I would argue that it seems like pretty much every person, like with some exceptions, pretty much every person who's come on here has said something about like, I felt like I got to know that person, that artist's soul a little bit better, a little bit more of what that artist valued by listening to this album. That's been pretty universal, fairly, I would say. But for you, there's this action to it. There's this active quality to the kind of putting your money where your mouth is aspect of this. Like, this is how I feel about films. It's pretty much a miracle that any film gets made ever, right? Like, it's like, that's kind of how I look at it. Even the worst film, all of the hoops you have to jump through to get it actually made and in the eyes of somebody on their TV or in a movie theater it's a feat. It's a miracle, truly. But I think the same could be said for albums as well, especially the album itself, the LP, right? Like, that's just all the machinations that are around that whole process necessitates. The fact that anybody does it is huge. So of course there's going to be like, how are you actually going to stand in your values through that process? That's an active quality, and a choice is something that you I'm grateful that you've brought that perspective to the podcast, because I think it's a story worth telling, and it's a thing worth remembering for any of us who choose to do creative things.
No, that's so true, because people always wonder like how to stand out amidst like a really, really condensed market. And I think that's it, because only you are going to have your own kind of compass. People might have like, a similar one to you, but you're the only one who's going to have yours. And so acting on those decisions is how you kind of like fortify, I think, your path in that sense. So yeah, I could not agree more.
I think Geese is actually a really good example of this, because they're a great example of the hype machine as it exists right now, right? Like, and the way they've navigated it, especially as like literal children, like they're 23, 24 years old. Like, they're babies, they're babies. And I say that like I'm so old, but like, they're like, they are distinctly of their generation, and they are young and coming up. And it's amazing, at least from the outside, from observing them online, kind of the grace with which they've moved through it so far. It's a remarkable thing to see. And when you're in that machine, it feels like it would be you probably have curveballs thrown at you all the time, ethical quandaries that are coming up. So if you can do that, then kudos to you.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, Tyler.
Yeah.
I think it's time for the
deliberation phase. I didn't slow down that time.
You didn't. I know, that was great. That was great. That was fantastic. Dear listeners and viewers, trying to time this when we are in different time zones, it's been tricky, but I think we nailed that one. Yeah,
totally. All right. So we're in the deliberation phase. Michael, why don't you start this one off, since I did last time?
Sure.
We're going to assess your case, Lindsay.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, first of all, I have to give you credit for defending those two tracks. Because I also would have accepted the fact that you could have said that your Anti-Griselda is actually riffing on the Rolling Stones' 19th Nervous Breakdown, and that would have also gotten you points. But you successfully you tackled those. I don't know. I'm just impressed by the fact that, like, I think both Tyler and I walked into this meeting thinking that, like, oh my God, this is crazy. It's going to be so different from when she talked about the Sex Pistols. Like, this is going to be a very Village People focused conversation, and this has been the exact opposite of that. Right. I mean, you have found a thread between the Sex Pistols and the Monkees, which is crazy to me. But the fact that you could just speak so, like, not technically an educator right now, but always an educator in my heart. And I think that, well supported argument. You drew connections in ways that, I mean, I never would have thought. And also, you like Mike Nesmith too, so I'm down with that. What about you, Tyler? And
we should have known. We should have known that Lindsay, with her rigor, You know, there's an academic rigor about the way that you have approached this both times you've been on, and that is super admirable and appreciated. The thing about your mom running into Mike Nesmith on the elevator, that was a really vivid image. You know, like you can tell that this band lives in you. We can always tell via the Zoom room when somebody really feels like they are embodied by an artist, and the Monkees are clearly very alive in you. So, I mean, there's not much more that can be said about a band that, you know, kind of gets left to the side, right? Like they get overshadowed by the Beatles for any number of reasons, and there's kind of a meme-ish quality about them. I think in using today's terms, but I think there's also something about the wholeheartedness that you bring to, like, you didn't do this in bad faith. It wasn't a joke. You didn't you didn't do it ironically, which is what we don't want people to do. Don't nominate a band ironically. Only nominate a band if you genuinely, authentically think that they wrote a perfect album. So so that is a mark in your favor too, is that there was no hint of irony about this. That's where I'm at. It's a good case, but I guess it's my turn to put it to you, Michael. You heard the case that Lindsay made. You listened to the album. You've enjoyed the album. Tell us, does More of the Monkees by the Monkees go to 11? Is it a perfect album?
It sure is. I think I might have actually, I know I said in the previous episode that I'm not a vinyl guy, but when I was little, like, I listened to albums on vinyl. Like, I think I actually owned this album.
Really?
Because because I know I had that greatest hits that came out in the 80s, and I'm pretty sure I bought another one, and I think it might have been this one. So
that's so cool.
This took me back.
You touched on something, Lindsay. Hell yeah. This is such a treat to have you back. Thank you so much for doing this.
Thank you for having me. This was so fun.
You've got a sharp music mind, as sharp a music mind as anybody we've met doing this. So we're really grateful to have you in the Friends of the Pod group. We should see, you know, you already mentioned a little bit about the band Bible, but we do reserve a little time here at the end for you to shout out anything else you want to. You know, like, everybody should go follow your Substack. Is there any other events or albums or pieces of media that you want to shout out? Any causes that you want to shout out? Now's your time to plug anything you want.
I don't know. I guess, like, just to say what the Band Bible is.
Yeah.
It is. So it's a Substack, and I do bite-sized interviews. They're all 5 questions with artists where I kind of ask them, like, different things about, like, the lessons they've learned throughout their career. That's kind of like the common thread that binds all of the questions together. I created it to create a way. I can talk. For those who are just starting out in their music careers, to have a place to look to get career advice if they don't have the means to get that from an intermediary, like an agent, a manager, or what have you. So it's somewhere to go to get advice when you have nowhere else really to look for it. And the people who have given their advice, very graciously in the Band Bible, have been Billy Squire, Tommy James, Ivan Dorshuk of Men Without Hats, Tommy Rowe, Eric Turner from Warrant, and more. And so, yeah, that's what it is. And
yeah.
I guess I would also just say, support emerging artists throughout all types of art, support emerging filmmakers or visual artists or other, just anything. Just, really see who's doing good work behind the scenes and give them your money and your time. That's what I would say.
Well said. And I will say I can +1 that take. I don't mean to. Is that the official stance of this one goes to 11? Michael, is to +1 that take?
I think so. Yes. I approve.
All right.
Yes.
I didn't want to speak out of turn. So, yeah, well said. Well, we are super, super excited by all those interviews you're doing. There's some great names, and I'm looking forward to the time when we can sometime go to a gig together. That's the hope here.
It'll happen.
Yeah, I
can
so
feel
too.
it. It'll happen.
Eventually.
Yes.
Maybe we'll meet in the middle in Philly. Maybe that's what happens. Is Lindsay and your husband, you guys come to Philly. We'll all meet Michael in Philly, and we'll go to whatever the best venue is.
It is a good center point.
Yeah, it is. Thanks again for coming back, everybody. We love you. Hope you had a great week. If you hit us up on socials, if you have anything that you want to, any questions you want to ask, any takes you want to impart, any people you want to recommend for us to talk to. Michael, you have any other admin for our people before we go?
I do not. I think the only thing left to say is
bye.